So welcome everyone to our World of EUC Insights webinar. This is the trenches of Teams 2.1 with my friend here, Ray Davis. And Ray gave a great session on this at EUC World Independence in DC in October. And this is a follow-up webinar from the request of people at the event, but also people wanting to know more about Teams. So with that being said, I am going to go ahead and hand the ball over to Ray. Just one housekeeping item. I'll be monitoring the chat, but I'll also be looking at the Q&A. So if you have questions, please use the Q&A, and we will get them throughout the presentation. So with further ado, here is Ray. So let me stop sharing my screen and give it over to Ray.
All right. Does everybody see my screen?
Yep, I can see your screen.
Okay. So, hey guys, I'm Ray Davis. I'm a senior system engineer. I do a lot of EUC stuff, and I focus heavily into the EUC space. Primarily, originally with Citrix, and then I started branching out to AVD, W365, and now RAS. So today I'm going to try to go over as much as I can on the Teams situation within our, our challenging day-to-day stuff that we have at times. Um, uh, so happy New Year to everybody, and we'll begin. So I'm going to start out with some of the basics. I mean, most of you are probably familiar with what Teams does, how it works in the VDI optimization aspect. Any kind of unified communication tools. Compared to a desktop, there has to be some kind of engine that can optimize the media to the client or the endpoint. This representation right here is just kind of a high level to kind of show you the basics of what goes on when a client or an endpoint has no optimization, and then kind of goes into where a client endpoint does have the optimization. So, I mean, most of that's just very basic stuff. You guys get the concepts, but it was just kind of a representation to show what's going on. And we'll move to the next slide. So it was October, November, actually it was December of 2023 when they first announced Teams. Teams was rebranded from Electron application to a WebView 2 application with a footprint that ideally was stated to reduce the footprint, 50% less memory, the CPU reduction, startups, launches, things like that. Originally when it first came out, just like everything else in our organization, it takes time to develop around it. Microsoft released it, and then unfortunately for us, we had to kind of plan and figure out what we needed to do. This slide kind of shows you kind of the history with the classic teams and the new teams, and just kind of the overall, as well as what it can do as far as the compute aspects. This right here is more of the new teams with the VDI 1.0 channel, which most of everybody is familiar with the WebRTC, how it works. From a Citrix aspect, this is just an example. It's really similar in all the other EUC platforms. So, when the teams first came out, I was super excited. Because the classic teams did have, they had some things that just wouldn't work properly in a VDI, right? And it was really around the technology as far as the WebRTC and how that it integrated with a VDI aspect. So Microsoft they've done a fantastic job as far as revamping that whole platform, but as we all know, we ran into some situations. So with that, the new teams sounds great, right? Yeah, but you got to really plan. You got to plan carefully. And the reason for that is really around what's changed? So they went from a MSI to more of an MSIX with the AppX package. Um, the installer is a bootstrap, and when it installs into the C program files Windows app, and it's hidden. Ideally, you're not supposed to really mess with it, but there is some scripts out there that people, they build workarounds to do certain aspects. Um, and one of the common problems that I see is that it's dependent on an app readiness service, so it has to register on the behalf of the user, and it is a lot better than it once was, but there is still things that you need to put in place if you're having issues. Most of my experience with Teams 2.1 has been Windows 10, Windows 11, and Server 2022. I have done a couple 2019 installations for customers, and it is a bit of a headache just putting it out there, but it's doable. Um, One of the biggest things that I have seen a lot um, originally was the TMA plugin, which is the Outlook plugin for Teams. Originally, it was all incorporated into the Teams installer, which it still is, but like 8 months ago or so, Microsoft released a hey, you want you to install it by using the all users switch, which gave it a better integration with the actual platform. Um, and how it loads and how it plugs into the Outlook side. And it definitely is a lot better, right? So there was a lot of security tools that we were seeing that was blocking the actual plugin from loading. And then Microsoft came out with that alternative way, and then it became the new, and that's kind of what we do moving forward. Um, so really, from a platform from an installer perspective, it's changed a lot. And there's a lot of good documentation out there. Microsoft has really revamped a lot of the docs from the beginning to now, and it's exceptionally better, in my opinion, based on what it was. Um, so really, what does all this really mean? Like, okay, Teams has changed, it's different, it's MSIX. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, like I said, you got a plan. You got to understand your profile solution. You need to understand if you're using Citrix Profile Manager, if you're using FS Logics, or if you're using Profile Unity or another third-party um, profile solution. You just got to make sure that it's supported and that it can handle how Teams operates now within the profiles. Um, the original way, when it first came out, was to do some exclusions to get around a couple things, but it just didn't work right. And then in time, industry caught up. Um, Common things that I still see today is no start menu icons. The app's not registering properly for the users, even though it's installed. The Teams add-on for Outlook is installed, but it's not registering for the user. You get a lot of invalid file handlers when you're trying to migrate from the classic Teams to the new Teams. Um, you can see, like, I could keep going on. There's a list of things. Sometimes it's slow to launch, it delays, it could be 15 to 20 seconds before it starts up. If you modify the JSON files too aggressive, um, it will crash and it will reopen back up, and it will crash and it will reopen back up. It's almost like it's resetting itself back to a state that it can understand. Um, there's times where, in a controlled environment, it's very challenging based on the nature of how Teams 2.1 works as far as the MSIX, but there is a set of requirements for that Microsoft has put together over time, and it really is a much better installation, depending on the environment, I will say. So these are some of the challenges that a lot of us went through. With the FS Logics, Citrix, their profile solution at the time didn't support it. Windows 2019 at the time had, it was just kind of a nightmare, right, to get teams to work with it. Kind of going back to where Microsoft decided to put the all users flag back into it. Um, there was a couple reg keys that you needed to check within the HKey current user hive. That some extra pieces that you had to do that they stated is not needed anymore. And then as time came, and all these issues started coming in, there's hot fixes they were releasing for each operating system. There was certain requirements that needed to be checked for like local development installs, things like that. Teams is failing to launch for new users when they signed in, but it works for some, and that has to do with the app readiness servers where the application's not registering properly. You guys probably will notice like there sometimes the teams in the start menu doesn't show, sometimes it did, and Microsoft came out and said, hey, we got a fix for that. For now, do the exclusion for FS Logics for using that. Same thing with CPM. Um, as we kept going through all these fixes, there was just more stuff that we just kept discovering as a whole. And it's not only just Microsoft; it's just other third parties that have to integrate their products with this. So it's a very challenging aspect to get teams to work efficiently. Where it was, I would say it's a lot better now, in my professional opinion. Um, so this is kind of like a round three of things where I went through and all the things that I had issues with, and that we would find fixes for, or working with some of the vendors to address. Some of the aspects of the versions like AVD, Win365, and Citrix, how to really make it work optimally in their environment and their EUC platforms. And really, for me, what it came down to was, it was all about, for me, was profiles, how robust your profile solution was. And in time, I pretty much saw the writing on the wall. So with that, I buckled down and worked with some of the back end folks at Citrix to kind of help drive it, because I knew that FS Logic was working on their stuff and I wanted to contribute to that. So we worked together and got a lot of the fixes put into the 2402, and then it just keeps exceeding from there. It's but from my perspective, a lot of it was around profile solutions, just not knowing how to capture the information that it needed once you got past the installers and the registration aspects. So these are some of the things that I still continue to run into. And again, a lot of this is documented out there and I have some QR codes coming up. A lot of this is documented out there for the Microsoft documentation. Like, from the time that they started releasing this until now, I have a web scraper that I have, and it monitors all their activity and all their changes on the website. And they change it 2 or 3 times a week still, not as much as they used to, but they're constantly adding and constantly providing good value in that doc. And there's third-party blogs that come out, and there's also tech blogs that come out from Microsoft that they release a lot of good information. So a lot of the things that we see, that I see still, is a common denominator, is just around how tight things are locked down. And I know this is we're security driven for the EUC footprint, and it is what it is. But when the team's MSIX doesn't want to register for the user, or you have the disable apps on first logon set, or you don't allow the trusted apps, things like that, it's just going to break teams. It's not going to work. And you kind of have to give that to your security team, let them review it. Questions are going to come in. There's scripts that we developed around this stuff. Um, when you're migrating from the classic teams, there's tons of leftover child entries from the classic teams that are usually in the HKey current user hive, and each user can get a little bit of a different experience depending on the environment. And, some environments were spotless, and some environments it was just like data was everywhere. And throughout the last year, working through that proc mining and seeing all that stuff, there's a lot of stuff that we developed to address that. Just want to make sure I'm good on time. Okay. We to address that, and it's continuing to involve, a lot of the work that we do as a community of the world of EUC. We all, try to do our best we can to help each other out, and it really helps when you run into something you haven't seen, the forum, the community. Hey, I've done this, blah blah blah. So it's kind of like, okay, incorporate that into a script, things like that. And I get it. A lot of you guys are probably saying we shouldn't have to do that. No, you're right. But unfortunately, it is what it is at this point. It's how I look at it. Uh, no software is perfect, and it's nice that when you can tackle this stuff and you accomplish it, and you get a good feeling. So, like I said,
Hey,
good
Ray,
things take. Yeah.
real quick, I got two questions for you.
Yes,
Actually,
sir.
three. Two from the Q&A from Phil. What are the best logs to view to see why Slim Core isn't being enabled in a Citrix environment?
That is at the end of my presentation.
Okay.
But there you have to hit Control Alt Shift 1, I think, and it generates a log bundle. And then within that log bundle, it's going to give you tons of data, but you're trying to look for what's called a diagnostic text file, and you want to look at the VDI text file, and it's kind of going to give you some breadcrumbs to start combing through. And also just what's the next question would be more about the EUC stack, but being that the Slim Core is GA now, that's where I would start, and then make sure obviously the team's admin tenant's going to have that ready available.
And that's going to the second question about fully optimized being rolled out.
Yeah, so it for the Citrix side, it's GA. AVD side, it's been GA. W365, it's been GA. Now I have noticed it takes some time to pull that DMSIX piece that it needs down from the client. It took yesterday, the day before, I didn't have it, and then finally I just kept exiting and closing it, exiting and closing it, and then finally I was able to see in the event log where I could see it, pulling it down. I saw the DLL. Also, there's a plugin that you have to have on the client, depending on your installer. So if you're using Citrix Workspace app, they have a plugin that you have to have that will help initiate that whole conversation. AVD has it as well. Same thing with W365. And you got one more question?
Yep. And the last one is I have a significant number of customers running Omnissa Horizon. Are there guidance relative to this EUC warrior battles / checks?
So my advice to you on that one is to get on Wordle VUC, and go to the W365 channel, and you're going to find a lot of your information within there. There's so many things to check for, and if you can grab my QR codes that I'll have, I'll basically I'm laying it all out to where everything's at. I wish there was an answer I can say, hey, here's a blog, or here's this is going to fix everything, but it's different in every environment. There's a good blog that a gentleman, the CTA, he released. It's on the World of VUC as well. It's fantastic. It goes over everything that we've been fighting for the past year. It's solid blog. It's kind of more of a why things are happening and how to kind of address it. It's not so much like how do you install Teams from start to finish, but it's more about the issues and how to fix the issues that have come in.
And that'd be a good one for what Sean's asking about, the guidance for battles and checks. And then we have one more question that just came in. Is there any guidance on publishing 2.1 on Server 2019 as a published XenApp application?
No, well, so if you're using the WebRTC, the guidance is it's really in the docs as far as how you publish it, but it doesn't work for Slim Core, not yet. And there's some things that you got to consider when you're publishing Teams as a published app. One, that by default, Teams is going to auto launch, right? So if you're publishing that to a server, right? And you have Word or Excel or another seamless application within that stack, Teams is going to auto start every time, and then it gets into a point to where um, you got to log off a session, and Teams doesn't want to release the session. And there's a couple of things that you got to do if you're using WIM or if you're using some kind of logic to figure out like, hey, you know, do I want this stuff to launch when I'm launching other applications? And there's like, Citrix, for example, has some things that you can put in where it's the when you log off, it does like a check and it closes the application. Uh, that's really one of those things that's tedious. It's more of an environmental situation where you got to figure out how you're using it and if the published app for Teams is really viable for you, because sometimes, when you publish a unified communication tool, it's I mean, I don't really see the benefit of doing that, honestly, when you're trying, unless it's a chat pattern, a chat type use case, but people do it. Um, However, it's not something I really enjoy doing or I like to promote that, because in my professional opinion, Teams is really designed and baked into more of a desktop mindset, not more of a seamless app. But it is doable, right? I'm not saying it's not. It is doable. That's why they give you the options, but it's still limited to the WebRTC right now.
And then last one that just came in. Any indication when Slim Core will be available for Linux clients?
Uh, I don't know exactly on that, but I heard a rumor that it was quarter 2 to quarter 4 of this year. And when
So
you say,
some
yeah, when you say Linux, I'm particularly thinking about like Mac and iGel. But
and then
it's just rumors. There's no nobody didn't tell me that. It's just me talking and kind of getting some of the lay of the land on that.
from the chat here, someone says end of 2025 is what they heard. So
Yeah, nope, yep, nope, he's right. That's exactly what I heard too. Yep.
okay, keep going. Thank you.
Yep. So as I was saying, good things take time, right? I get it. You know, Teams is a lot of us use Teams as our main unified communication tool. Sometimes it can be challenging to get it work on a desktop, and when you step into the VDI aspect, no matter what EUC platform you're doing, there's no layer of complexity, right? However, from like I said, from this date right here, from October 5th of 2023 until now, it's dramatically improved. Now, these vendors I have on here, these are the vendors that I know of and things that I deal with sometimes, or that I hear and I talk to that really focus on the development around the Teams aspect. Now, there's other vendors as well. I didn't want to put everybody on there because I can't speak to it efficiently. Then I won't put it on there. Um, but with that, so, throughout the year was WebRTC, and a lot of people are still running that. But they finally went to the Slim Core, and this is more of a higher level architecture. And this is nothing I made. This is on the Microsoft's website where they kind of break it down. And a lot of you guys might be looking at this like, it looks a little similar like the O. And okay, it is similar, right? But the difference here is that the endpoints have a built-in plugin, and they use what's called a VDI bridge. And then there's a process behind the scenes that sees that and initiates the kickoff to go get the bits that it needs on the client to make that work. And with that, I'll kind of highlight some of the pieces that how when I was going through this, how I broke it all down with the Microsoft Docs and understood it. So at first, when wasn't GA, you had to enable this tenant feature, and then once that kicked in, uh, you would download the plugin that you need on the client. As you can see, for example, I'm using Citrix. It's a DLL that gets embedded, right? And then once that it could take some time, right? It doesn't just happen right away. I wish I had a magic answer for that, but I don't. I usually give it just a couple of days, but in time, when you launch your sessions, it will engage, and then you'll notice that the plugin itself, it will notify that it needs a required Slim Core version, and then the Teams DLL hits the CDN and goes and pulls that down, and then it installs it in a very similar location like the bootstrapper installs. And then once that happens, it opens up a secure channel, a virtual channel, depending on your EUC product, whether it's over the RDP or it's HDX. And then there's a VDI optimization channel that kicks in that tells it that it's slim core. And then if you have the right version on the golden image or the machine catalog, however the master, the VDI side, then it links up, and then you'll see that it starts saying that the slim core it's optimized via slim core. And newer builds of Citrix, and I even think the AVD side, there's a reg key you have to put in place. Like one is, is WVD, or the Citrix has another one that you put in place. But for the VDA aspect from Citrix, that's handled now automatically. But if you have a AVD or W365, just make sure you check that reg key. It's all in the docs. That's what allows it to recognize to do the offloading pieces before all this kicks in. So I'll kind of take you through like how I'll give you an example of a Citrix one, how I start. You just see a white screen. So the first thing is, it's just a very high level, right? So when you install CWA, you're going to see this option, right? And it can be done command line as well. And then what this does is this is going to lay down a plugin within the endpoint, right? In that location right there. And then what happens after that is, for me, I like to check and see what it's doing when you open up your Citrix Workspace app and you use Process Explorer, you can see the MS Teams plugin DLL, for example. And then what I like to do on the endpoint is, because you have to allow the trusted apps, you have to allow the development without a license, and then you have to also allow not to block admin user install. I run a little quick PowerShell just to make sure that these numbers match. That's what's going to tell me that in time, when the plugin reaches out and does what it needs to do, that these are good and it can get what it needs. So then you'll see, and then after this, part of the Microsoft documentation is it doesn't take effect right away. They say 2 app restarts. I've had to do like 6 or 7 to get it engaged. Like I said, it just depends, and I don't really know why. I think it's just all the checks and balances it's trying to do. But once that engages, you'll run this command on the endpoint, and you'll see your package. So this is the Slim Core package on the endpoint that is initiated by the plugin. And another thing you can check is you can check on the endpoint, and under your app packages, you can see the streaming reader was created successfully for the app package for Microsoft Slim Core, blah, 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 blah. That's another validation. And then you'll see this starting to get loaded up, and then you'll see a MS Teams VDI.exe, which is the Slim Core part starting to kick in. And then before you know it, this will happen. And I know these are kind of like, when I broke all this down, this was all the pieces that I had to go and understand to really see what's happening behind the scenes. So with that, a lot of people, I get some of the questions I get asked, but what is the difference between Slim Core and WebRTC? So Slim Core is basically the desktop version of Teams. When they were developing Teams years ago, they couldn't make it identical, and it was always limitations. So by them revamping and redeveloping that, excuse me, it allowed them to rebuild it with a different architecture, which is allowing them to get very close to like the desktop client. And with that is where it came to all these different little plugins and pieces. And this is kind of like and this is on Microsoft Docs. This is kind of a what's available for Slim Core versus what's not available, or what's available for WebRTC, and you can kind of understand. You can see that there is some differences, and there's things that are going to continue to come down the pipe. But the biggest thing is like the gallery view, the quality of service, things like that, where users could not do in the classic stuff. And so this is a slide that I pulled from Microsoft. I didn't build this slide. It was actually a good representation of how it really worked at a high level solution. And it kind of goes over the bits and pieces that we went through, highlighted in a couple slides ago. But essentially, you have your endpoint and you have your VDI, and the VDI bridge engages the DLL engages the VDI bridge, and then it goes out and contacts the CDN and pulls down some core MSIX pieces that it needs on the client. And it's kind of like a high level representation of what it does on the client. So some of the prereqs, right, is Windows 10, 11. I don't have 11 in here, but Server 2022. And then the RDP client, if you're using AVD or if you're using W365, it's wrapped into the remote desktop app, or the newer one, which is the newer Windows apps. That's kind of encompassing everything, where everything's going to launch your AVD or your W365 desktop. These are the versions. And then as far as the Citrix requirements, the requirement to even get Teams working is 2203 CU3. However, if you're on a 2203 stack, stay with CU5. If not, you need to go to 2402. That's where I started really seeing all the good enhancements from 2402 and newer. If you're on 1912, or excuse me, if you're on 2203 pre CU5, you may have challenges, but I always try to go to CU5 on that to be able to take advantage of some of the profile management pieces, unless you're using FS Logics. Obviously, it's different. With that,
Hey, quick
so this
question.
is, yep.
From Brian here. Any news when user uploaded background will be available?
No, no, I don't have any news on that. No, not yet. As far as being able to change the background and stuff, I don't know yet. I wish I did.
All right, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
No problem. So for the Citrix plugin, CWA 2402 LTS or higher. And then if you need to do a command line, there's a command line parameter. And then I'm trying to think, after there was one CWA version, I just can't remember, where they incorporated it now to automatically install it. I'd have to go back and check the docs, but it's in one of the newer CWA builds. And like for BYOD, it's going to prompt them to install the plugins, but the older ones that don't have the plugins, the admins have to download it, or they can install a newer CWA. And then that QR code is some options on how you can keep the plugins updated through global app configuration service. If you're Citrix side, there's a VDI plugin manager now that Citrix has for on-prem users, so you can control that. And then obviously you have your traditional SCCM or Intune mechanisms. So for the plugin for the AVD Win365, it's all bundled into the remote desktop client, or their Windows app client, which is the newer one, or you can go and download it directly from the store for the bundle that includes it. Again, it's very critical to make sure you understand the documentation and read the documentation before you try to get SlimCore working, because there's three GPOs or reg keys that you have to have in place for the SlimCore bits to go download. That QR code has the information you need. That was what I explained earlier when I ran the command, and I had said that I saw the three parts within the registry where it was 1110, and that tells me that that was set right. You don't have to do it with PowerShell. You can do it with GPO. It was just an example at that time. So one of the things that I I started digging into a lot more was, as some of the vendors are catching up with like the bandwidth and the how to check whether it's optimized or not from an administrative perspective, is the team's admin dashboard. And you can see here, like if you don't have access to this, then I would probably work with your team's administrator or your M365 app administrator and try to have them give you access to this just portion on reporting, because within here, there's a tons of data for teams. I mean, there's just so much data. It's a lot. They've really done a good job with it. And this I'm still diving into it to try to extract the data, but you can see here, like I did a test meeting with my VDI that's in Kansas City, and I live in Florida. Um, so you can see here where I was using Citrix Teams VDI, and you can see like my jitter and my round trip time and things like that. I was also sharing my screen. I was also talking back and forth. I was trying to get some stats going, and you can see like how long I was on the call for. Um, Also, you can see like my network connectivity. It doesn't give you a whole lot of data that um, from this like hierarchy right here, but then they have within they have reporting, and within there they have tons of filters, tons of data that you can extract. This is just a high level that I extracted. You can see that I was on Wi-Fi, and then you got to go through and you got to look at. You'll see like these pieces like no media, fair audio. I can't remember what VBSS. I think it was something to do. I was streaming and sharing at the same time, but I was on Wi-Fi. But there's a doc, one of these QR codes that breaks all that down. There's so much data in there you can extract, and you can use Power BI as well to use and build your own custom charts the way you want it. So for an example, you can see that I had two sessions that were using Teams, and I had one session that was using the VDI version of Teams. And that is what I was going off to really help me see if I was optimized or not. Now they obviously have reporting in here too that will tell you if you're optimized or not for SlimCore or was it VDI optimized 2.0, I think it's called. Um, Now the question for the logs, right? How do you know why isn't SlimCore working? Where's the logs at? So in that QR code I gave you, um, you can hit the Control Alt Shift 1, and then what it does is it downloads a bundle, and inside that bundle you're going to have tons of files. And then what I did, there's no magic, right? I don't have any like magic, how do you fix it? I just dig through the logs just like anybody else would, and I make heads or tails of what I'm seeing versus what I'm not seeing. You can see here that, it says the VDI bridge handler is in SlimCore, and I connected, right? For an example. The VDI debug text file, it's going to give you some information, but this diagnostic log is going to give you a lot more information. And then there's also some other logs, and it's in this QR code at the very bottom that contains more information. But I usually start here and I look at the event logs, and I monitor the event logs as far as seeing if it's downloading the bundles that it needs, which is right here, the Apex event logs. Now, one thing that I do run into all the time is, when you have SlimCore engaged, right, and you go to a disconnected session, um, and you try to connect back to that session as a user, it's going to say media not connected, or SlimCore. I said vendor, but that's because it may say Citrix, it may say AVD. It is say not connected, and I have to put in workarounds for that. And typically, you have to kill the Teams process, and you have to open it back up to get that connected. So with that, you could use any kind of automation tool, any kind of user environment tool to help address that until the time being. But I remember correctly on the classic Teams, it was the same way. So I don't know if it's something that they're going to address for reconnected sessions or not. But for the interim, um, I recommend going off triggers and looking at log in and log out, or disconnect sessions and reconnect sessions in the event log, and trying to build something around that. And as always for Citrix, like, if you're using or you're using the virtual channel security aspects, make sure you have your virtual channels properly defined with teams. And you can see that star in there, and that star represents the version. As the version change, it's kind of like a wild card. So this is one of the things I wasn't sure about. And what happens when I'm on Windows 10 or Windows 11 and I'm running Slim Core, and then I need to jump to my Mac to test something else, but I need my desktop. So what I did is this is a quick little simulation. That Citrix aspect represents just a control plane. It can be any control plane. It doesn't have to be Citrix. It's just what I was using at the time. So what I did was I jumped on this morning, and I connected to my VDI, my Windows 11 24H2, because I hear that some people are having a hard time with that, and I haven't had any issues. It's pretty straightforward. But again, I'm in a lab environment, right? So it's different than a full-fledged production environment where you have like 3 to 4 different kind of security tools and things like that. It gets complicated quick, but I was able to, I opened it up. I was connected. And what I did was I jumped over to my Mac, which is like right beside me. I logged into my portal and I took my session over, with my same Citrix session, and then Teams said, "Hey, we need to restart to give you the best experience." And at that time, it fell back to the WebRTC Citrix HEX optimized. And I was still able to do my call and headset and camera and all that good stuff, with the classic 1.0 channel. And I thought that was pretty cool, actually, because I get a lot of questions around that, like, hey, what happens when I'm on this and I go to here? Or, I got a user that's they have a Windows 10 or they have a Windows 11 and everything's streamlined, and then when they go home and connect, what is it going to do? Well, it's going to do this, assuming you have the right requirements for the plugins installed. And I say plugins, I mean um, CWA or the remote desktop app, things that have the stuff that's built in. um, from the classic side with AVD, it's the media redirection service, things like that, or CWA, it's built in natively. Um, let's see what time. Okay, so
A quick question for you.
yeah,
Any info on getting included in the Mac OS Slim Core beta testing?
no, I don't have any info of that. I don't, but I can try to find out.
Yeah, I'm checking too. I was looking to see if anything off the top of your head.
No, I was talking to a gentleman this morning. I don't want to throw his name out, but he knows who he is. He gave me some tidbits that he met with their Microsoft rep, and they gave him some information around the Mac and the Linux side, and that was where I got the information for the end of 2025. Now, as far as the beta side, I'm not for sure, but I'm sure we can find out, because I do have some Mac users, but not a whole lot. But it is nice to know, for the Mac side, how it's going to work. Predominantly, it's really for me, it's about the thin clients. That's where I really am starting to see it at the most, is being asked for, like, the Linux, the IGL side, the uh, thin OS, things like that. But I know there's a lot of information out there. I know a lot of you guys are probably running into issues, or you can't get things to work quite right. And it's just, you got to have patience. That's really what it's about. You got to have patience. You got to tackle it. You got to read the documentation. Um, and then if you still can't get through it, one of the things I recommend is going on to the World of EUC. And there's a lot of talented individual folks on there that have a lot of great information. 4 or 5 years ago, I didn't know about that, and it just really helped me out. We're not going to know everything. Sometimes the documentation doesn't cover everything, for the trenches. But my recommendation is to read the docs, start there, and you'll get through it. And it is a lot better than what it was when it first came out. None of this existed. There was people like myself and many others. I had to put this in play, and of course, Microsoft sees it and they update their docs and stuff, but it's still not flawless, but is a lot better than what it was. I will tell you that it is a lot better. Um, Shout out to a guy named Fernando. He's put a lot of documentation out there um, for the VDI aspects of 2.0. He's done a real good job with it, showing and demonstrating it. It really helped me out a lot too to see all that. Um, and with that, I really don't have anything else. I'm at the end of my slides. It's black screen.
You had good timing then. Does anyone else have any questions here for Ray? We still have a little bit of time. So feel free to ask any more questions that have come up or you may have not gotten answered. While we're waiting for that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yeah, log off sys checker. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yes.
I couldn't remember in my head.
So a couple things here. Where my chat window go? This was recorded, so this will be available later on our YouTube channel. Are the slides going to be shared, Ray? Ryan's asking.
You
Rocky said thank you.
I don't see why not. I mean, everything is from the internet, so it's not like there's no sensitive data. I don't see why we couldn't.
There you go. Another question here from Kyle. Generic question: do you see people migrating away from Linux-based thin client in favor of Intune managed endpoints due to the lag of feature availability for Linux? That's a great question.
Yeah. So a lot of the customers I deal with are hardcore either iGel. There is some Dell ThinOS people out there. But as far as migrating away, I haven't seen anybody migrating away. Now I do know that, uh, things are slower to progress for that side. See, also, like, I don't really deal with a lot of the Intune aspects as much. Stratodesk, yeah. Yeah, that's another one. That's a good question. I don't really know how to answer it because I don't really see that. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I can't answer either because I don't really touch that side of it as much anymore on the client side. So
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of Intune with some customers for like Windows 365 Cloud PC, but it's all back end is Windows based, not really the client side. So I wish I could answer you officially, but I don't know.
yeah, Phil's saying we might get away from iGel, Kyle, because of unified communications and Teams demand not matching Windows. I get it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the thing. If you need the latest and greatest quickly, it does make sense, doing the Windows based clients because those are usually your first class devices that will get rolled out first before you can have that lag with the thin client manufacturers to get inside of their firmware and on their OS.
yeah, no, that's I know when I did deal with the Windows based thin clients, 10zig was like really good to go with but it all depends on what you're trying to do, I guess, because then you got to maintain that patch level, that effort too, with more of a Windows thin client type setup versus a Linux base, which is different. Yeah, no, it is frustrating. I deal with it all the time. Totally understand what you're saying. But sometimes I just don't have the answers to fix certain things, and it's just for me, it's I don't stop until I figure it out, and kind of a bad thing, unfortunately.
A lot of good comments here and feedback on the session. So thank you, Ray. Um, Upcoming events for the world of EUC. If you are in or around the Kansas City area, we're having our first meetup next Thursday at Brew Lab in Overland Park. This will be the third local meetup under World of EUC. Stay tuned for more local meetups. Ray's had his last year in Jacksonville. We've also had Nashville as well last year. But stay tuned because we are talking with more people about getting more local meetups going. If you are interested in being a local leader, please reach out to HQ and we will start that conversation. Um, As far as other events, next Friday, we are going to have. Actually, hold on a second. We have two more questions in here. Any OFDC suggestions with Teams 2.1? Ray?
Yeah, so you're using the off data file container for FS Logics.
Yep.
So if you're using the that side of the house, obviously the exclusions and things like that, you're not going to be able to do. What is I guess my question is, what is the main profile solution?
That's a good question. Are you using both containers? Are you bolting it on? I'll say they're using FS Logic, so they're using both
Yeah, see, and I got
containers and
away.
FS Logics. Then
Yeah, so I got away from that. I don't do the container side anymore. As far as like if I have FS Logics on the profile side, right, the container, and I don't go and deploy the Office file to the ODFC side anymore because everything can be contained in that main profile. Like, if you got like files on demand for OneDrive and things like that, it's all cache data like OST, like the user can re-download all that. I put everything into like a container type for the profile side. Now it depends, but you can enable like if you're running both of them, I wouldn't put it in there. I just wouldn't. I would put it in the main profile. That way you can have some control over some exclusions and you can control things much more, in my opinion, versus using the ODFC side.
yeah, I've kind of gone to that more too of just using the single container on FS Logics. And it
Yeah.
kind of seems like Microsoft is kind of moving to that way as well because you're not seeing as much features coming on the OFDC side, especially with that,
Yeah.
any kind of exclusions or that kind of stuff. It's kind of like everything is there. So,
I think I looked this up. It was like 4 weeks ago. I think that if you go look at the ODFC Microsoft Docs, they talk about when to use it and when not to use it, but they also state that if you're using native FS Logic containers, there's no real reason to use the
yep.
ODFC side unless you're using like a third-party profile solution for the main profile. But there's really no need to do it that I can think of anymore.
Yeah, neither can I. The only other thing I can think of is if you don't care about all that cache, and if you're doing like cloud cache or any kind of replication, where you just want to replicate the main profile piece, but you don't care about that cache, and they can rebuild that cache in an event of a loss or a DR event. So you could split that out for that reason. But yeah, for the most part, I really don't see as much use for the ODFC as much anymore as well.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and some people are probably thinking, well, my Outlook cache and all that's important. I said, yeah, it is, but you're also got to remember if you're in like a DR state or a secondary, I mean, it's going to download your email.
Yep.
That's not your business critical application at that point.
Yeah, because it's all cache basically.
Yeah.
Profilix Community Edition. So next Friday, Dave Brett is going to be talking about his community tool for profiles. Make sure you stay tuned make sure you tune in for that because I've had a chance to look at it and give feedback and input. It's a nice tool that Dave Brett he's built from scratch and going to release to the community. So make sure you tune in next Friday for that. January 22nd, we are going to have our Elevate webinar with Nutanix, one of our founding partners. They're going to talk about AHV for EUC, the 2025 edition. The QR code here at the bottom. So you can go to that or worldofeuc.org/events for our events calendar. Not just our events, but also there's an events calendar out there for EUC community based events as well. EUC World, which Ray was there last year presenting, one of our presenters. We are having that again this year, a little bit earlier in a new location. So EUC World 2025 will be in August 4th through 7th in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're going to be at one venue this year, a nice venue. Minneapolis is a nice city. I actually lived there for a while before moving to Kansas City. So it's a very nice city, a very nice venue. Registration is opening soon. So use that QR code to get notified. If you are interested into presenting, we do have a call for papers open. So if you go out to worldofeuc.org events and you'll see EUC World 2025 link there. If you have a topic, whether it's endpoint management, whether it's VDI, security, AI, anything that relates to end user computing and you have something you want to talk about, go ahead and submit a topic. We will have our community base. So last year we had lightning sessions that were 20 minutes, Ray.
Yeah,
And
15,
15,
20
20
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah.
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 So what we're going to do is based on feedback, because since we are a community and we are for the community, by the community, we take input, feedback, and so forth. So some of the feedback was that the sessions not only were the technical sessions, but the longer technical sessions, but the shorter technical lightning sessions were too short. So they're going to be 30-minute sessions for lightning, and 60-minute sessions for the full technical sessions. Jen posted a link in there in the chat for it. So again, if you want to present anything related to EUC, please feel free to submit a topic, or if you just want to attend, you can sign up for the information there. And then our prize giveaway, which you will get a World of EUC shirt, is going to go to, drumroll, Brian Langston. So Brian, HQ will reach out to you to get your information about getting your prize. With that, I want to say thank you, everyone, for attending today. Don't forget, you can sign up. If you go to worldofeuc.org, we have all the information out there of signing up, getting to Slack. We can continue the conversations there. Thank you, Ray. I know this was a great topic at EUC World Independence last year. So thank you for coming on and sharing more with us. And stay tuned for more from Ray in the future.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
With that being said, everyone have a great rest of your day and happy 2025.